the more lucrative a black market alternative becomes. Paragraph T. Generate hundreds of millions of dollars in new state revenue annually for restoring and repairing the environment, for youth treatment and prevention, community investment, and law enforcement. To which I reply, the hundreds of millions of dollars generated go to well-connected special interests and to expand the police state, and little to nothing goes to the general fund. Paragraph U. Prevent the illegal production or distribution of marijuana. My analysis of that line is that actually it has the opposite effect. This bill actually encourages illegal production and distribution. Growers who have been practicing their trade aren't likely to go away if they lose their licensing privileges. Most likely they'll just go underground. Paragraph B. Prevent the illegal diversion of marijuana from California to other states or countries or to the illegal market. This is an outright lie. Nothing in ALMA provides any new methods for preventing diversions. Paragraph W. Preserve scarce law enforcement resources to prevent and prosecute violent crime. This is another lie. The bill specifically gives funding and instruction mandating law enforcement to focus on enforcing the new and existing cannabis laws. Paragraph X. Reduce barriers to entry into the legal regulated market. My analysis, this is another lie. ALMA creates an onerous regulatory environment which has spawned a brand new costly compliance industry which further increases the cost of participating in the legal cannabis market and enhances the profitability of a black market alternative. Paragraph Y. Require minors who commit marijuana-related offenses to complete drug prevention education or counseling and community services. To which I would say, cannabis is not a drug. It is a mildly euphoric, non-toxic herb. It's time to stop lying to our children. A better, more effective, and more honest approach will be to provide a psychological and medical evaluation to see if cannabis would be a better treatment for our children than deadly, dangerous pharmaceutical drugs currently prescribed to children, many of whom use cannabis to counter the effects of the drugs that mom, dad, and the doctors gave them. Paragraph Z. Authorize the courts to re-sentence persons who are currently serving a sentence for offenses for which the penalty is reduced by the Act, so long as the person does not pose a risk to public safety, and to redesignate or dismiss such offenses from the criminal records of persons who have completed their sentences as set forth in this Act. My analysis is that it's hard to find instances where this subsection applies. Most people locked up for cannabis are there for possession and possession of sales of more than 1 ounce. Those crimes and sentences remain intact with the passage of ALMA. Finally, paragraph 8A, allow industrial hemp to be grown as an agricultural product and for agricultural or academic research, and regulated separately from strains of cannabis with higher delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol concentrations. To which my analysis is that this is the crown jewel of this whole legislation and of the previous legislation passed in other states. Cannabis prohibition enacted in the 1930s was not intended to protect us from reefer madness. The law went after the hemp farmers, taxing the profitability out of hemp and effectively eliminating hemp as a valuable industrial crop. Restricting the THC content of industrial hemp, along with a restrictive onerous regulatory scheme, has the same effect of eliminating profitability of growing industrial hemp. Most farmers in Colorado, where hemp was first legalized, who tried to grow industrial hemp, found that there was no profit to be made, and for the most part abandoned their efforts. THC is used by the cannabis plant to protect the plant from ultraviolet rays. An insufficient amount of THC results in stunted growth and lower crop yields. The crops could be highly profitable if the THC content restriction didn't exist. Yields could increase up to 5 times or more without this restriction. I suspect that it's probably possible to genetically modify the hemp plant to replace the THC protection with some other genetic splice that would make the plant profitable, but at the same time will give a monopoly to the patent holder, similar to what's been happening with other genetically modified industrial crops.
And that's just the beginning, huh? That's all, buddy. That's not even what.
That's what I prepared for the night. I've been sick for the last 3 days, and so I wanted to prepare my own findings and declarations and my own interpretation of what the purpose and intent was, but I've been bedridden for 2 days and I wasn't able to finish that part, so for now, this is what you guys get. I can open up to questions and answers though.
And before we get, and just to touch on that industrial hemp part, because I've mentioned it with Robert, is that basically it is making, this Prop 64 is allowing for only 1% THC, so that George Soros, who still has millions in Monsanto, they want to make it 0.3%. That's what the Prop 64 legalizes, 0.3% THC, so that its funders, Monsanto, can patent and own and genetically modify the seed.
Yeah, we don't have no proof of that, but it's a logical explanation. I believe that the 0.3%, which was established in the 1980s, was actually introduced by Monsanto, because they knew that they could genetically modify industrial hemp to achieve such a low level. Currently, last time I did research on this, there were 7 strains in the whole world that naturally grew cannabis hemp at 0.3% or less. And those strains all occur in the far northern reaches of the hemisphere, where the sun does not provide strong ultraviolet light. Those plants generally will grow 5 or 6, maybe 7 feet maximum. Whereas an unrestricted cannabis hemp plant grown for industrial use can achieve heights of up to 15 to 20 feet and grown in a 4 or 5 month period. So the profitability is just exponential if cannabis hemp was unfettered by that 0.03 restriction. Yeah.
Yeah, looking at the discussion you have of number X, which is reduce barriers to entry into the legal regulated market, your response is that the onerous regulatory environment spawned a brand new costly compliance industry, which further increases the cost and enhances the profitability of the black market. Since you've had MRSA now for 9 months, have you noticed any changes in the black market one way or the other?
Have I noticed any changes?
I mean,
Oh no, it's business as usual, but what I have noticed is that growers are scrambling to hire these professionals to bring them into compliance, because it's something that they can't do on their own, or if they attempt to do it on their own, most likely they're going to screw something up. And it just takes one omission or one mistake on your application, and your application is deemed to be invalid. And if they decide that omission was knowingly omitted, then not only will they deny your license, but they may not allow you to apply for a new one.
well, my question though is, if has this MRSA change, maybe it hasn't happened yet, but my thought was that you're claiming there's going to be a change if Proposition 64 passes, that the black market will increase, specifically because of the barriers. We've had barriers that have been laid down now, have we not, in California already, to medical marijuana. Has that caused an increase in the black market?
Well, I think the black market's pretty stable right now. I mean, I don't know if there's...
Why would then Proposition 64 cause...
What Proposition 64 does is that this, like I said, you have your non-compliance, disciplinary action. Any disciplinary action, which includes omissions, includes errors in your accounting, it includes mistakes in your track and trace systems that everybody has to employ. Any of those are grounds for revocation of your license.
And that's not the case under the MRSA law right now.
No, that is the case in the MRSA law.
Well, then why doesn't...
They haven't started implementing MRSA. They will start implementing MRSA in 2018. Yeah, but right now everybody's scrambling to figure out what they need to do to be legal producers of cannabis. And what I'm saying is that as these growers and providers screw up one at a time and lose their licenses, they're not going anywhere. They're gonna grow illegally. They're not gonna stop growing. They've been growing 30 years. They've been growing illegally for 30 years. So it's like no big deal for them to keep growing illegally. I mean, now they're growing legally because they're growing medical pot. But if they have to revert back to illegal grows, they will do that. That's my supposition.
But when you argue that there's going to be more money for enforcement than there is now under Prop 64?
Yeah. If you look at the breakdown of where the money goes for for licensing fees and fines that are going to be imposed. That money goes to all these various agencies that they spoke of and then a bunch of other ones to increase enforcement. And so they're gonna get a windfall of money for enforcement. And this windfall of money for enforcement is going to allow them to micromanage everybody's cannabis business and make it real easy to find problems, find mistakes. I've been an accountant for 30 years. I make mistakes on my accounting and I find them like later. And if they find them before I do, I can lose my license if I'm doing accounting for cannabis. Yeah.
Another question is regarding, I guess it's G, which is your earlier presentation about offenses, the penalties for current offenses. You mentioned that most of the current laws and penalties remain intact. Possession of under an ounce is still an infraction punishable by a $100 fine. Now, one of the main selling points of 64, as I think we were talking about earlier, was that it does legalize possession of small amounts. Yet you're saying that possession here...
In private or in a sealed container, sealed unopened container.
I want to clarify that in your literature.
I believe I did. I said that if you can get arrested or you can get that $100 fine for if you, for example, go down to
open package.
Yeah, you go down to the store and buy a package, buy an eighth of weed. You take it to your friend's house. You smoke half of it. You put it in your pocket. You get arrested. You get a $100 fine, even though you legally acquired that cannabis. Whereas if you have it illegally, like it's business as usual, right now it's a $100 fine.
Can you elaborate on the open container aspect?
Yeah, that is the open container aspect. The open container aspect states that all cannabis transported in public must be transported in sealed, approved containers, unopened, and any containers that are opened subject you to that $100 fine, provided that you have less than 1 ounce.
Doesn't it specify a passenger in a car? Isn't that in there somewhere?
Yeah, a passenger in a car has those same restrictions.
A passenger in a car.
Yeah, cannot use weed and cannot possess weed except for an
In
unopened.
the open container.
And yeah, it has to be an open container. Yeah. And you have to be able to show proof that you purchased it legally. In other words, you have to have a receipt.
Jeez. Oh.
That works.
Okay, I'm going home now.
Hey.
It's overwhelming me.
So 5 years from the start of that, all the mom and pops will be driven out of the business, and everybody will be forced into going to the big ag or grow medical.
Well, that's kind of my reading on this. I mean, the fact that they put that 5 years in there, if they want cannabis to remain the way it is, with small craft producers producing great product every year, new strains every year, they wouldn't have put a 5-year limitation on there.
Already the county of Santa Cruz is lined up with what their goals are to be for the size of area that you can grow, because they're putting these same things out that they're stealing water and stuff like that. So, it's the same lies already coming from the county of Santa Cruz and what they've already said they want to accommodate.
Yeah, and they can't exceed.
It was all fixed back in April in Watsonville when they gave away the big grow licenses. I told you the man's name that got it. Yeah, it's all the page for it.
But those aren't big grows.
Yeah, they're big, huge grows.
They're big, huge grows for local consumption. But what I suspect is that eventually there's wording contained in Alma that states that if the federal government decides that they want to declassify cannabis and regulate it at the federal level, then the Attorney General can repeal the Health and Safety Code and all the city and local codes and bring the state into compliance with the new federal guidelines. I believe these federal guidelines are designed to create a corporate monopoly for cannabis just like they have for alcohol. I believe that they will probably even include it in the ATF. ATF will become ATFM, you know, and it will have the same regulations, probably maybe even worse than that alcohol, hard alcohol has, including banning local grows, or banning people from growing their own. Will be just like distilling your own alcohol when the federal government takes over and establishes their guidelines. What ALMA does, it instructs the Attorney General to, well, it says they may, it doesn't mandate it, but it says they may repeal the Health and Safety Code as it applies to cannabis, and also it says they can repeal the city and local codes as it applies to cannabis and conform them to the new federal guidelines. So this is the same thing that happened after alcohol prohibition ended, is that the cities and the states and the counties all came up with their own ways to regulate this big discombobulated system, and so the federal government, in their infinite wisdom, decided to create one uniform standard, and so that's why we have alcohol regulated at the federal level by the federal government. Even though they don't have a mandate from the Constitution to do that, they have to get permission from each state to do that, but all the states went ahead and complied, they gave permission. Same thing happened with, in the 1970s, the Controlled Substances Act. There are actually 51 Controlled Substances Act. 50 states each had their version of the Federal Controlled Substances Act. And they're all the same, with minor exceptions for what the penalties are. So for example, California might be a $100 fine for weed, some other state might be 10 years in prison, but they're still going to be illegal, they're still going to be Schedule 1. All that remains the same.
And while we have the audience here, could you touch, I know that there'll be another teaching, but can you touch on the taxation that they had written in under this Prop 61?
Yeah, the taxation, okay, the way it's worded is that the fees, licensing fees they require licensing fees be no more than what it costs to regulate the industry. So there's a cap on what the fees can be tied to the cost of regulating the industry. At the city and local level, though, there are no restrictions on additional fees and additional penalties, additional restrictions, zoning requirements, etc. They can do above and beyond the minimum state standard, so that basically, like I said, a local government can enact such restrictive policies that it basically could create what would in effect be an outright ban.
And I just meant the amount of tax, say, on an ounce and on leaves.
Oh yeah, the amount of tax. Let me see. That's I got it here.
$9.25 per ounce wholesale, $2.75 on leaf wholesale. 15%.
That's for growing. There's tax on growers, additional tax on retail sales.
$9.25 per bud and $2.75 per leaf, and then 15% at the state level.
Yeah, for the retail sale. Yeah, it's taxed to the growers and is taxed again at the retail level.
So
it's
it's about 50%.
Plus
No, it's
sales
not- it's not.
tax if you don't have a medical card.
Yeah, and there's also sales tax. Yeah,
If you don't have a medical card.
yeah. So it could reach upward into 30% range.
And there's a 7% sin tax currently in Santa Cruz. And
Yeah, all those taxes, there's no limit on additional taxes and fees imposed by the city or local government. It could be 7%, it could be 70%. It could be anything they want. There's absolutely no restriction in Alma restricting what the city and local government, city and counties can do in terms of taxation.
Right on.
So this has been a discussion that you and I had, Mike, on the radio show. I did a radio interview with Mike, I guess it was the day before yesterday, last night. You can catch it on the free radio if you want to go to the Huff website. I'll leave a card. But you talked about some of the implications for medical marijuana. What about
actually it does notify. The first thing they do is they take the Bureau of Medical Marijuana, established in MRSA, and they create one unified Bureau of Marijuana. They drop the word medical. And the reason that they're doing this is because the second thing they do is they don't go after the patient. They leave the patient alone. What they do is they go after the doctor. The doctor can no longer write a prescription or write a recommendation to just about anybody like they can now. So for illnesses and ailments that aren't listed in MRSA as seriously ill, doctors can get in trouble for writing notes for those types of, lesser considered non-serious illnesses. So that's probably the majority of note holders aren't AIDS patients or cancer patients. They're, people like me. I use it for insomnia. I use it for pain. I use it for things that are not considered super serious. I can do without it, in other words.
What's listed as serious?
They have a list in MRSA. I don't have it written here. I can find it, but it's basically the same thing as what's listed as serious in the Compassionate Use Act, except for the Compassionate Use Act contains that additional phrase, any other illness for which marijuana provides relief. That is missing in MRSA.
And that's Proposition 215.
That is in Proposition 215. The other thing that's missing, the other attack is that in 215, physicians are protected. No physician will be sanctioned for recommending cannabis. That's in 215. That is eliminated by MRSA also. They actually have a whole paragraph on physicians recommending cannabis and getting in trouble for writing excessive notes. So basically the note doctor, you go down to your special doctor who does nothing but write notes. That disappears. It could disappear anytime. They've laid low. I suppose they're laying low on that until after November. Because once ALMA passes, it gives them the legitimacy and it gives MRSA the constitutionality to be able to do that. Right now they did it, it's in the bill, but it's not constitutional because it conflicts with 215 and they can't pass a law at the legislative level that changes an initiative voted on by the people. So in that respect, it's illegal right now for them to go after the physicians. But if ALMA passes, that goes away, that protection goes away.
Prop 215 contains the word affordable. It instructs the legislature to come up with a safe and affordable is the phrase you use. Safe and affordable. People say that's meaningless. I think it means something.
So,
I didn't hear that.
Prop 215 contains the word affordable.
And what's wrong with that?
There should be some cheap weed in there.
Well, I don't see $9.75 per ounce tax on bud.
Wait, you said Prop 215, you didn't say ALMA, you said Prop 215 contains that.
Right.
Yeah.
I think he's contrasting it.
I see, what you're saying, that's another attack on 215 by ALMA, in that they are adding all these extra taxes.
Yes.
No longer
Yeah.
affordable.
and so that,
Yeah, it's just like in Colorado, it's cheaper to buy weed off the black market.
could you dispel the myth for our viewers, especially with on video, in the fact that Prop 64 is going to free anyone from jail because no one's in jail for 6 plants, no one's in jail for an ounce. And could you touch on the point that if none of us can get our notes anymore, then that means we're virtually felons if we have more than 6 plants per house?
Or if you have more than 28.5 grams. Actually, it's a misdemeanor still, but it's punishable by 6 months in jail. And there are lots of people in jail right now for possessing more than an ounce. And that doesn't change. If those people don't get freed, they don't get their criminal records destroyed or any of that.
Will this changeover affect the amount of what you can have in your own personal growth or your own?
It doesn't specify. It says you can possess what you grew. You can possess it in your home, but it has to be safely secured. And
So it's still that same intrusion of privacy.
You can't transport it, you can't distribute it, you can't sell it or give it away.
But it'll be a kind of an atmosphere of more of having to prove yourself or something.
Yeah, they allow you to keep your grow, if you're allowed to grow.
What about the possibility of this changing through legislative action in the future? Because isn't that one of the concerns that you and others have talked about, which is that it's because it's now an initiative that passes, not only does it in certain specific ways supplant or possibly supplant 215, but it also includes a provision that allows the legislature in the future, without going through the initiative process, to make more change.
Right, that's, as long as it's specifically included in the proposition, then the legislature can do that. And that's thematic throughout all of the other states that have legalized. They all give the legislation, they'll give the legislation that power to change it. Some things have to be changed with 2/3 of the vote. Most things just need to be changed with a majority vote. And that's done, I suspect, because like I said, I believe the ultimate goal of Proposition 64 is to eliminate medical cannabis, make everything recreational, and turn it over to the federal government and large corporations.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Buddy. And we're going to keep everyone informed on our next, because we have a part 2 to this, obviously. Because this, what do we have left now? To do the rest of the initiative?
Well, voting has already started in California. I got my sample ballot last week. So people can vote already, and I suspect a lot of people are voting yes because they just legalized marijuana. So, I'd like everyone to just get out there and, let the people know, let all your friends know, post it on social media, that this is a corporate government, federal government takeover of cannabis, and that we have to stop it. It's killing 215, we have to stop it. When all pot's recreational, then that's gonna put a big damper on the current system where a lot of dispensaries and collectives are, they're concerned for their patients, and they try to find out which strains are best for their patients, which strains are best for certain illnesses and things like that. All that goes away if they're all forced into the recreational market. And if you take away all the patients except for the seriously ill, all providers are going to be basically forced into the recreational market just by power of the economics of scale of just having customers. So, they want that. Eventually, I believe they want medical marijuana to be something that comes in a pill distributed by a pharmaceutical company. And all pot will be recreational, and it will all be corporate governed, and it will all be just like owned by big giant corporations like InBev and these big corporations that currently sell us 40 or 50 different varieties of alcohol.
Yeah, I got a message that Monsanto spent about $250 million acquiring different companies, Gavita Light companies, I think General Hydroponics, Botanicare. So Monsanto is already poised to start trying to take over the buying out industries that are growing cannabis industries, hydroponics, lighting the Gavita lights. So this is Monsanto. George Soros has millions still in Monsanto. Prop 64 is funded by, George Soros. So this is a shady, dark money politics that we still have time to get to defeat this